What has your journey taught you about patience? And do you have any words of advice for these young grapplers that just want to get stuck in?
As a career, it's hard to get to the level. You got to realize, like, especially if you're going as an athlete, this is your career. Like, you're making a living and eventually you want to retire one day. You've got 5 years at the top to make enough money that when no one cares about your jiu-jitsu competition anymore, like, what have you got to fall back on as well? So
let's talk about CJI. How does that role of a coach change now that we have this quintet rule set of 5 versus 5 and you're the one that decides, do we send the little guy out? Do we send the big guy out? Do you have any thoughts on strategically how that can be played?
I might as well give away a little bit of strategy because I think the other coaches are smart enough to realize the same thing.
Welcome to the Partizan Podcast. I'm Ben. I'm here with Lachlan Giles, a man that needs no introduction, but at the moment you're currently the CJI2 Australasia Misfit Team captain or coach. And we've just had the trials here, the first ever trials. Tell me about how that went.
Yeah, it was good. It was my first time having anything to do with organizing an event, so that was certainly the last time I did it.
This was the guy carrying chairs. I personally helped you cut the tape to mark the tape. So yeah, you guys put a lot of effort in. But how was the whole day for you?
Yeah, I guess it's it is a lot of work. Just we thought about. I mean, I suppose you don't know how big it's going to be. Like I felt there was a lot of hype around it, but I didn't really know. I spoke to Sai Naji, who he ran Boa Super 8. We were going to try to get like a big event venue and everything, but I wanted a pit, and we struggled to find something with like the right seating that you can see inside the pit, because you can't just have like flat seating with a pit. Unless you have a 3/4 pit like we did here. But if you want a lot of people, then you kind of want elevated seating. So it was pretty short notice, obviously, as well. So we didn't really find something. So I was like, all right, well, I guess we'll do it at the gym. And so we were like, all right, let's build a 3/4 pit wall and, organize all these athletes and so on. So, I mean, it's just, I'm lucky that probably the hardest thing, I imagine, when you're organizing an event is getting the matchups you want and so on. I imagine that's probably the hardest thing, but just with the prestige and the hype around CJI, like everyone wanted to be a part of it. Well, pretty much everyone, but
for sure. And let's talk about the performances. We had the two winners, Declan Moody and Bilal Etabari.
Yeah.
Talk about the performances of those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, Declan was on the day clearly, he was ahead. Every match he was dominant. 3 submissions out of the 5 matches. It was an interesting thing stylistically that the people who like wanted to wrestle and do takedowns, they were also the people that got submitted, so I think whereas the people who were pulling guard managed to, so there was kind of, I wanted this in the matchups. I wanted to see like how people do against a guard player, how they do against a wrestler. Like I wanted in the 6-man round robin, I didn't just want it all to be wrestlers and so on. So we had 2 guard players, Kaya and Bilal. We had and then in the original 5, there was Alibi, Declan, and Bob, who I expected all of them really to be working for takedowns. And then there was the person who had to get through the 16-man, which was Kid Dale.
Does that surprise you? He's taken a break from his filmmaking and acting just to remind everyone how good he is. I think a lot of people forgot how good Kit was.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't know as well. I mean, I've always tried to tell people. He's definitely one of the most talented people. I've had a few talented people that I've trained with over the time have done very well, and Kid Dale would be as talented as any of those, so did not surprise me. But I suppose like you don't know at 39 without taking competition too seriously. That's probably the for me it was like, how's he going to do so long out of competition. And also he actually was only 88 kilos, I think, so he wasn't one of the heaviest guys in the division for sure. So I was impressed, but not surprised.
Yeah. And under a different rule set, he might have taken the spot, right?
Honestly, I think he was, in terms of overall grappling ability, he was, maybe deserves a spot. But the rule set, that's the thing about, and this is I've been sort of reading some comments online. People were like, oh, this and that. But for quintet, it's really you submit them, they submit you, or a draw. So Kit's amazing, really good at his wrestling's amazing. His passing is amazing. His submissions, at least yesterday were Saturday. Jeez, we're Monday.
Yeah, it's been a long weekend.
His submissions, he got one submission in the 16-man, and then didn't get any submissions in the 6-man. So I mean, unfortunately that's the quality we were looking for. He didn't display that in the 6-man, and also got submitted. So whereas some of the Bilal and Kaya, they had some moments where they had their guards pass and they were in bad positions. But I think just the fact that maybe because they're more comfortable, they're used to playing on their back, they're possibly a bit more used to being in defensive positions. They were able to weather the storm of Declan, really. He was the man that was coming for everyone.
Yeah, he was.
He wanted that $5,000
100%
most submissions prize. And they also were able to pull out submission victories and get up on the scoreboard. So that's in the end, that's the qualities we were looking for. And Bilal got one submission and didn't get submitted. He had some really good matches throughout, some back and forth. So yeah, I'm happy with the team. I'm very happy with the team. So yeah.
Talk to me about Bilal, because a lot of people don't know who this guy is. And when I came here, everyone's talking about Bilal. And I said this to Bobby with the utmost respect. I've never seen somebody have so much hype that's had so few competition experiences. So he's had a good match from Subversion, and I'm sure he's done a few local tournaments. But so many guys were so impressed with Bilal. Talk to me about.
Yeah, Bilal. So he's he's been training 4 years, which is I know that because I remember he came down maybe 2 years ago. I was like, oh, this guy's pretty good. 6 to 8 months ago, I was like, oh, he's like, it was still good, but I was now like, oh, he's starting to it was getting hard to pass his guard. And then 2 months ago, he was like, oh, I'm moving to Melbourne, and he's moved here now, and he's just another level again. And it's like, this guy's, he's starting to submit everyone, all the top guys, he's now submitting them all, and we're all going, whoa, what's going on here? So he's very, very good. And yeah, actually, I mean, I think we probably actually didn't get to see everything he can do at this tournament. I actually thought, despite him getting through, I think he's got a lot more in him than what he actually showed. So I'm excited for him to bring that out at CJI. And at his rate of progression, 3 months is a long time. Yeah. So I got some ideas on what he can add to his game. Having seen, because like you said, he hasn't really tested himself against the best guys as much yet in competition. So it was good to see him do that and see what areas we can work on to improve. You can see it in the training room, but it's always different when you see it in tournament. Okay, these are the areas to fix.
And he managed to secure probably the best 66 guy you possibly could have, Fabricio Andrey. Can you talk about some of the behind the scenes of what it takes to secure such a dominant
I think he was just, I reached out to Fabricio, and he was excited straight away. He was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was as simple as that. But obviously, theoretically, your 66 kilo guy is your weakest link in the team. Like a quintet format, if you're down, if someone gets submitted, that's now pretty bad news. So actually, despite most 66 kilo guys do have very good guards, but sometimes when you just have such a big weight advantage, you go look at guys like Baby Shark and in the open weight,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. If they're big enough, they can often find a way through that, and then it's bad news. But Fabricio, he's fought Kynan.
Yeah, we saw that in Polaris. He just ran through basically an open weight.
Yeah, he'll wrestle, and he's exciting. He'll wrestle, he'll throw down. He seems to be able to. He can win against those guys, but also he's going to be, because he's kind of loose in his style as well. I think it's going to be hard to pin him down and actually put him in a bad spot too. So, but yeah, I'm hoping he goes through and submits everyone, and so yeah, I think he's great. So that's yeah, and then we've got obviously Levi
and Lucas.
Yeah, Levi's, that's an impassable guard. I think against any weight, I'm confident that Levi's going to be able to not only impossible guard, but he's got great. We saw some good leg attacks at CJI. He's got great passing. You've only seen glimpses of it, but it's funny.
His leg drag is really good. Yeah,
we have a lot of good visitors come and like train, and they roll with Levi, and they do not expect what's coming for them when they play guard. They're expecting.
We saw it in CJI in the finals, right?
Yeah,
didn't want any of that smoke.
Yeah, so Levi's good. I mean, he's just good everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Lucas Canard, very dangerous. I think again, Lucas, I don't think many, even after the CJI.
Yeah, I think he's still underrated.
Because he's still a brown belt. So I think
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Can someone explain to me how that? I think
he's just had no one to grade him.
Yeah.
But so you haven't probably seen him go and compete in IBJJF tournaments and so on. And he just qualified for the last CDCC, but ended up doing CJI. But very dangerous, very good, top and bottom again. So
yeah, that's a stacked team.
Yeah, and then obviously Bilal and Declan. So yeah,
which brings me to I'd like to get your thoughts on the level of jiu-jitsu in Australia now compared to say maybe 5-10 years ago when you were coming up. Because to me it seemed like maybe 5-10 years ago there were only a few standout Australian competitors, and they mostly came from this gym, if we're being honest. But now it seems like the level in Australia has grown tremendously.
For sure, yeah. Well, I mean, we just got our best competitors just come through is Adele Fornerino.
Absolutely,
double gold.
Yeah.
So, that's shows how much jiu-jitsu in Australia has improved. But yeah, every gym, I think you're seeing people popping up all over the place that are good. It's just, I think, unfortunately, it's a worldwide trend. It's not just Australia.
Everyone's getting better, right? Maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, I think everyone's. I remember when I was coming through, like, I felt like you could almost just, if you studied a bit of tape and watched, like someone who's bringing some new technology to the jiu-jitsu scene, you could just copy it, and like no one knows, no one else was doing that at the time. So I'd like watch Rafael Mendes. I'm like, oh, there's a move that no one's doing, and I go. And there's no
Berimbolo in the early days. No one knew how
to defend it. Even in those days, I think at the world's level, people were pretty slow to catch on. Whereas I feel like it wasn't a trend then to like study the modern game, whereas now it is. So you got kids who are 12 who are doing the things that I wasn't doing for 30, 20 years. I haven't done 30 years yet, but I feel I was 30 years old.
But speaking of that, we've seen waves of innovation come through jiu-jitsu. Like we saw, in my time at least, we've seen the early Danaher squad with inside leg position and saddle attacks that kind of took the world by storm. And then we saw your era of like outside leg positioning and K-guard and 50-50 attacks. Are there any innovations right now that you're excited with or you've been playing around with?
Well, I think like, I think guard has, for a big part, progressed towards like the way I sort of envisaged it. At the moment, I think like the best guard players are mostly playing a lot of K-guard and so on. There's obviously there's still people playing inside position, but I think it's a little less common now. I mean, in the end, you mix it all together, right? But just when I think about pure guard players and the ones that are still able to deal with the modern game, it seems to be, people using K-guard a lot and so on. I think probably as, we've got a lot of K-guard players here, so we're starting to try to develop passing strategies around dealing with that type of open guard. You get enough people doing it, you start trying to shut it down in various ways, and people have creative ways of dealing with it. And I think, like under the legs passing will probably come up a bit more, and then people will get better at defending that, and then it'll continue on. Yeah.
So there's a lot of debate around training methodology right now. You've got Greg Souders and I guess Kit Dale. We talked to Kit Dale on the podcast, and he was one of the original guys that he said he would rock up late to avoid the drilling and just do live training. You've got other people that say, no, repetitive drilling is the best way, learning from each, you're learning technique from coaches in each particular step. Yeah. Where do you fall on in terms of skill development or how you like to construct a training room in terms of how to train?
Yeah, look, this is a hard one because I feel like it's quite an in-depth thing to go through. Overall, look, I mostly agree that things are best if you can do it live. If you can train it live, you're going to get more out of it. There's a way to train your skill set live. Overall, I think there is value in being taught, and in taking information in and learning that way. So if, I still, sometimes I get a bit confused about, obviously we're talking about the ecological.
Constraints-led approach to ecological approach.
I sometimes get a bit confused about what actually defines it, because some people say you have to train this way, and then others say that all types of training is ecological, which I think they're just looking at I've read quite a bit of literature on it. They're just saying like the lens that you view it through. You can view like all even if you're taught a technique, you can view it as like it's an ecological thing, how you actually learn it. Like it's not until you're implementing it and you're really just giving yourself a task to do. You could look at it that way, or you can say like, no, like taking information in is wrong. Like we shouldn't show
any techniques or solutions.
We should learn through implicit learning. Like we find out through the games and tasks we're given. I suppose so. If you can view everything through an ecological lens, then the debate around that is kind of useless to some degree. Like if everything can be, it's more just the questions of like the questions are important. Like, is it useful or not to be shown techniques and learn through explicit instruction? Like, is there a place for that, or should we pretty much make it all implicit? My opinion is a mix. There's a lot of what I do is, I've worked out myself, and I've been in situations. It's kind of like just solving the issues and as they arise, not even necessarily consciously. It's just like things that you're trying to pass the guard. You're trying to get a waist grip, and their leg keeps pummeling over. Like you just start learning how to get rid of the leg. And there's a lot of that. But I also there's a lot of things that I've been taught. I worked. This is where like I worked berimbolo for ages, right? I spent like I've been doing it for ages, and even like recently I sort of worked on the nogi bolo game a lot, and then like Levi, I roll with Levi, and I'm like, he was like berimboling me, of course, and I'm like, what are you doing? We stopped and looked at the position, and I'm like, why am I not doing this? Like I saw what it was. It's like a different approach. It's not something that, despite being in that same situation, if we're looking at it from an ecological lens, like the affordance was always there. I never.
Why am I not Levi?
Like, I never picked up on it until I like took that information, and then once I was aware of it and I'd been shown it, or you could say shown it or picked up on it through like I guess an information processing approach, then I was able to utilize it, and I was better at the berimbolo. And I think there's so many instances where that's the case, and there's some instances where I learned implicitly. So I just don't see it being valuable putting yourself in a box where it can only be one way. I just
another interesting question to ask would be, for those who believe that you shouldn't be shown any technique, you should never drill a technique, you should always work it out yourself live, essentially, is, do these guys still watch tape? And how is watching tape like a little how is that watching tape differently from the person explaining to you?
I don't understand what's different between watching someone doing a move and you're going like, oh, he does this, as opposed to someone saying, he does this. Like,
or saying I do this. Like, if I might explain to you, I grab the hip.
To me, that's still information. I mean, and I think everyone's doing that, so. But again, if you want to look at, like, I'm not against calling all of that equal. Like, maybe the theory of ecological is skill development is correct. Like maybe everything is just ecological, but then we allow that, like, maybe it is that actually you're just, when you see something, you're giving yourself a task, or you're changing where your attention is. Now my attention is here, and then I learn through the live feedback. Like if you want to say it's that's fine. I just, that's where I feel like debating whether ecological is or isn't correct kind of gets.
We do get bogged down a lot in the theory, right? We get bogged down a lot in.
Should we learn like this? Is this a good way of training? Is it not? Should we study tape? Should we watch instructionals or not? To me, I look at how good everyone's gotten, and I think instructionals have been absolutely crucial in that.
I think
like
so too.
The last 5 years since the big, actually really COVID, I think was when people were like, oh, I guess we can't train
nothing
much,
else
let's
they can do.
study. And I feel like everyone got so much better, faster, and they all started playing a much more modern game. So I mean, I think things like that are very important.
Speaking of watching tape, who are your favorite grapplers to watch and study at the moment, particularly if they're maybe lesser known guys, or you just watch the guys at the top?
I study mostly like I've got either a problem I'm having, like I'm trying to work my north-south passing and it's not happening. Who's good at north-south? And I'll start looking around, like Declan was great on the weekend with his north-south.
He made a comment that you were stealing his move. I put a story up.
Oh, really?
He was like, that's my move.
Yeah. Well, I went and studied because he got past, a few people, but Bilal and Kaya through the north-south position. And I was like, what's he doing different, So things like that, ideally you get someone who's good at a position. If you wanted to work your berimbolas, you'd study Levi or, Alpha Mendes. I used to study them a lot when they were competing, the Mendes brothers. And yeah, so it's very specific. If I wanted to work my camping, I'd study Joseph or Daiki or someone who's using camping a lot.
I'm excited to announce that this episode of the podcast is brought to you by SubMeta. SubMeta is like the Netflix of jiu-jitsu instructional content. Instead of spending $200 on a 9-hour instructional that, let's be honest, you're not going to watch it, sign up for SubMeta and have instant access to over 150 courses. Filmed by the man himself, Lachlan Giles. Use code word Partizan, that's Partizan, all capitals, to get a 64% discount on your first month. Click the link in the show notes to get access now. Back to the show. I'd love to talk about your career a bit because there are a lot of young and up-and-coming grapplers now that want to quit everything and go all in at jiu-jitsu at 17 years old, right? But you took quite a different approach. Like you studied physiotherapy, you worked as a physio for quite some time, right? And then you were competing and training and working for over a decade before really having this breakout moment. And now things are going really well. But what is your journey taught you about patience? And do you have any words of advice for these young grapplers that just want to get stuck in?
Look, as a career, it's hard to make it, to get to the level. You got to realize, like, especially if you're going as an athlete, if you want to be a jiu-jitsu athlete, you've got 5 years at the top. And if you're wanting to get paid, like, this is your career, like you're making a living and eventually you want to retire one day, you've got 5 years at the top to make enough money that when no one cares about your jiu-jitsu competition anymore, like what have you got to fall back on as well? So I think you should be working on, I always believed, like, actually when I was younger, I never thought I was going to do what I did at ADCC. That kind of just like, my goals just went up a bit. I won the Victorian Championship. So I was like, oh, I'll try to go the national level. I think I came second at Abu Dhabi Pro Trials. And I was like, oh, I got a chance of being like one of the best in Australia. I came second at this. So I pushed. I won the Pan Pacific Championships and eventually ADCC Trials. And then it's like, well, what's next? I guess I've won that. Where can I set my sights on next? ADCC, try to do well in that. But I think going back to going off topic there, but
right. But you've had quite a patient approach, and you've had
working as a physiotherapist.
Exactly, you're working with a full-time career as well.
I did my PhD. So I kind of at some point I was like, oh, it'd be cool one day to like work as a physio and have a gym. I never thought I'd be making any money from instructionals or anything like that at the time. I think most people, if you're full on into jiu-jitsu, you should have something else that you can go fall back on. You can get a bad injury that could set you back, and you could literally, maybe you could never train again, or like impaired with your training. So I think one of those options, if you're really into it, is just opening your own gym. I think most people, most of the people who are right into it should be thinking about like, how can I one day do this? Therefore you want to be picking up some teaching skills, business skills, all that sort of stuff. If you can study something, I usually recommend, like, if you really want to take your jiu-jitsu seriously and you want to also work, then try to get something that's not highly intensive on the body, like something you can sit down and just
white-collar
edit
jobs.
edit some video clips, or like
we
white-collar jobs.
We need an editor, so reach out in the comments.
Yeah. something like that where it doesn't make you sore from work. So I think overall, if you can have something else, that's a good approach.
You mentioned teaching and running a gym. What are some lessons you've learned running this gym? Because you're obviously well known as a competitor. You're well known as a coach for your instructionals, but you also run a very successful academy here, like easily one of the best in Australia. What have you learned from that business venture experience?
I'm kind of lucky because I don't do any of the business side of it. I just kind of get to teach jiu-jitsu. It's like a partnership. So,
Okay,
so Absolute sort of takes care of all the marketing and the reception and staffing and all that sort of stuff. And my role is really just running the jiu-jitsu and, some high level decisions when need be. So
some of the best gyms we've seen, like Roger Gracie is a similar. I think Roger runs the jiu-jitsu and he has a business partner. So that's a lesson in itself.
Yeah,
a lot of these guys might try and start a gym by themselves with no business experience.
For sure.
And really struggle.
Yeah, I imagine that's very hard. It's hard.
Speaking for myself here. So I guess find a partner, find people that have complementary skills.
Cons. It depends what your personality's like. Like if you're good, my skills, I'm not like good at managing people and organizing people around and so on. So like, but if you're good at that, maybe then you get full equity and you can organize it all yourself, and that's great. For me, it's certainly a lot less stress having not needing to do that. Probably jiu-jitsu culture-wise. Look, we've managed to build up a great competition team, and obviously I think just also awesome just regular students as well. I've always tried to just stay out of politics. That's been my thing. I've never told anyone that they have to represent Absolute to compete or train. I've sort of said you
haven't banned them for cross-training.
Never banned anyone for cross-training. If someone was training at two gyms, I'm like, you just, represent whoever. Like, if you, of course, like, I'll be honored if you represent me. Like, that's or the gym. Like, that's a nice thing to do. But also, like, I'm not gonna treat you differently if you don't. So that's always been my approach, and I think that's a good way to be. I just saw so many gyms splitting up and people kind of like having falling outs over those sort of things that you kind of have to actively make sure that, like that I can see how people get drawn into these sort of conflicts.
A lot of emotions.
Actively try to go, okay, like I know this, this is how it is. And like, I'm not going to make a situation any better by getting mad at someone and telling them to, that they're not allowed to try. Like, I just feel that doesn't really help a situation.
It doesn't make that culture that you want holistically. You have a lot of young up-and-coming athletes come through here. Have you noticed anything in common with those who are successful or who are getting better much quicker and those who don't? Is there anything that separates?
They all just drill.
They drill every day, 3 hours a day.
In truth, not drill. Well, I mean, it depends what you define as drilling. Like, I think Levi came through a form of drilling, not so much now that he does that, but there was a form of drilling where you basically put a timer on and you rep out the move 20, 30 times for 5 minutes, and then your partner does, and you go back to your 5 minutes. And that's literally just reps. I still think for some moves that can be beneficial. Levi even does solo drills now. He's
shadow drilling.
Yeah, I
guess they shadow boxing and shadow wrestling.
Maybe the best guard player in the world, maybe the best grappler, who knows? He's doing solo drilling and he comes back better, which is crazy.
Maybe everyone should start doing shadow drilling.
Yeah. But pretty much everyone that I've seen is good, like studies, and they'll often come in an hour before training, and they might not be like repping things, but they're like sitting in position. Like you look at Bilal, and this was the same with like a Jeremy Skinner when he was here, and someone was like, dude, like you've probably spent 60 hours in the past 3 months just sitting there holding a foot, like practicing different angles that you can apply pressure. I'm like, what more can you fight? But
there's more. I was talking to Bilal before. There's still more.
But he's still he's doing that every day.
Out of that foot.
Yeah. So I mean, you can say that doesn't work, but look at the guys the guys that are doing that seem to get better. So I think like this sort of troubleshooting, like getting a feel for things, you are getting feedback. Like, hey, like, can you move here? Like, it's not just a static, like you lie down and I'll.
We spoke about Joseph does this a lot, right? He calls it tinkering, and
it's tinkering. Yeah, I try to do the same. You know, I try to do it in rolling. I try to do it in situational stuff. So yeah.
Because a lot of people ask you on podcasts about, the ADCC absolute run and like that highest of the high, but I want to ask if you have any challenging moments or tough experiences that you've had throughout your career and what you've learned from those.
Tough experiences, as in like
any setbacks or like just difficult periods, any losses that you've taken hard or.
Look, I've always tried to look at things long term, like even maybe it's dumb when you're like 35 and you're competing, but I lost to Lepre and Gordon at that 2019 when I had that obviously amazing run in the open weight, but I was not happy with my my guard retention. I got my guard passed pretty much by Lepre and Gordon, and it was actually only after that. So I think it would have been 34 at the time that Ari was training with us a bit, and I knew Ari had like, you try and pass Ari's guard. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I was like, I got to work out what he's doing and do that, And my guard, I swear, like 6 months to a year later, I was twice as good as a grappler. Just like I think the areas which I messed up in those 2019 runs, I think I'd close them off. Not to say that other things would, that they're great athletes, so they would have found other ways to try to exploit my game. But I feel like the things that I did wrong there were fixed, and I felt like I pretty much had an impassable guard at that point.
Yeah. That's something I've admired about you, because the way you handle losses seems to be different than the way a lot of people handle losses. A lot of athletes put a lot of their self-worth in their performance or their skill set. So if that gets challenged, it kind of can crush them sometimes, or sometimes they don't take those opportunities. Like you took the opportunity to go into the absolute. You've just taken a loss in, was first round loss, and then they ask you to do absolute. You look at Muhammad Ali and you go, yeah, okay, like I'll do that.
Well, I didn't know I had to prove. If you had said that's who you're fighting first round, I would have been. Yeah.
But you take those losses and instead of internalizing the loss or making it bigger than it is, you've looked at it quite rationally or analytically and thought.
I think if you just look at like, I'm always, if you look at a longer term improvement, then a loss is, you don't feel too bad. You're like, okay, I lost, but I'm going to be better in a year.
Yeah. So you look at like 3 years. Where do I want to be in 3 years?
Yeah.
And what do I need to do to get there? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I try to be realistic as well. I think like there is, it's a hard one because, you get these people who are like, you got to believe you're the best. If you genuinely believe you're the best, then that's how you become the best. I never know which came first, like do people believe they're the best because they are the best? Like you get someone like a Gordon Ryan, right? Like obviously extreme confidence in his ability. Does that come because in the training room, he is literally beating anyone, and he's never had anyone that came along that he hasn't been able to overcome quite quickly. Like maybe they beat him at first, but he's always been able to he's like, yeah, I'm just like the best grappler, So is that what makes you think I'm the best? Like,
that's a really interesting question.
Can just believing you're the best
make you better? But if 100 guys believe they're the best,
yeah, I think one thing it probably does is in competition, I think you got to back yourself a little bit. Like if you believe like, no, I should be beating this guy, like you start to push and go for things where someone who's maybe a little more, I'm not sure I should be beating this guy. I need to find my moment. They're going to be a little more hesitant at actually just like taking the shots when they arise. Because you're never going to have a perfect, you fight Lucas Lepre, like you're not going to have a perfect opportunity. You're going to have like something where like you got to throw a bit. You got to take some risk and commit fully to it. And, if it works out, it comes in your favor, but there's always some risk. He's never going to give you a position where it's all you and no chance of countering. So
there are a lot of athletes that are really great in the training room and then they just can't pull it together in competition. Is that ever something you've experienced, or have you seen people make it past that challenge?
I've definitely I've had matches where I think it's like I've always performed best, like in that open weight. Like if I could even talk about my mindset, like when I fought Lepre in my weight, I was a bit more cautious. I was like, try to find the moment. Whereas in the open weight, it was kind of like, well, I got to get to these guys' legs as quick as possible. That's the only way I can win. So I'm just like, it just actually made it a lot simpler, like what my game plan was. Just like funnel it in, get there, because you can't let these guys put their weight on you. I always found when I was competing and I had to, like I was a bit nervous about or hesitant, I did a lot worse. Sometimes I'd compete like that and I'd look at this score and I'm like down by 2 points and there's 2 minutes to go. And then I'd be like, oh, I've got to go. And then I'd start winning, and I'm like, why didn't I do this
from the start?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about CJI. So you coached Levi to the finals. What was the experience of coaching like and the atmosphere of CJI? Because it's obviously the whole story of ADCC versus CJI. I want to know what that experience was like for you. How did it feel? How does the rule set and the pit change things?
Well, we didn't have a pit in place. We sort of tried to. We had like a what do you call them? The mats that you throw people on.
Oh, like crash mat against the wall.
Yeah.
Did it work or not really?
Not really, but at least we got a slight feel of like, what's it like. But I think the general plan was just let's stay away from the wall. Look, the event was amazing. It was extremely smoothly run. Levi was amazing. I don't feel like I did too much there, to be honest. You just, I suppose, just like advice in between rounds and pacing. We did a bit of competitive game planning. We watched, like, you don't know until the event, the brackets come out. Like, you don't know who he's gonna possibly face, but we kind of watched and we tried to go, they're going to try and pass this way. These are the first grips they look for. In the back room, we would I'd try to pretend I'm his opponent and those sort of thing. But mostly it's just when he's out there, he's doing his thing, and I'll at someone at that level, I don't believe. This is where I actually think something like the ecological approach here. Like I don't believe I can tell Levi like what grips he should be taking. He's so good at he's fine tuned as to what he needs to be doing in the match. And I feel like if I start putting his attention elsewhere, I could actually make him worse. And like if I start telling what I think he should do and he starts focusing on like a grip somewhere else, like that could put him off. So I'm hesitant to do that unless I see something very obvious. Sometimes I try to read, like I can see the opponents trying to set something up, like last time he got into your half guard, like this way, be ready for that. He's trying to stuff your leg, just sort of try to read the opponent's intentions a little bit. Otherwise it's just strategic, like going into that last round, I said, because you don't know the score. So it came up from the fourth round. I thought he won the fourth round. So I said to him, if you've won this, just don't get your gut, just go, basically just go defensive for the last one.
Keep not getting your gut passed.
If Cade wins this, you got to go for it. You got to take a risk, like do something else, because they're not scoring your guard play like they were, But yeah, anyway.
How does that role of a coach change now that we have this quintet rule set of 5 versus 5, and you're the one that decides, do we send the little guy out? Do we send the big guy out? Do you have any, without giving too much away, do you have any thoughts on strategically how that can be played?
I think I might as well give away a little bit of strategy, because I think the other coaches are smart enough to realize the same thing, that if you get up on the board early, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So, it really dictates like how much risk your fighters have to take. So you want the early submissions. You want your best guys out there. But then there's a little bit of, like saying that, do you then throw out if you think the other team's going to put their best submission guy out first, like do you throw out your hardest guy to submit
the defensive
first?
guy? It's almost becomes like a video game.
Yeah, it's tricky. So, obviously once you've got someone,
really good
if
point.
someone's in and they submit someone and they're going on,
you're ahead.
Who you can start planning who you're picking out to go next if you see what their guy's going to be, and vice versa. But when it's unknown, it's an interesting I guess there's like a bit of
strategy.
Yeah, I should start playing poker or
There's
something.
some sort of video game, I'm sure, that they've solved this problem.
Study some game theory.
And for the trials, you had an interesting little rule where the coaches and the athletes, for the 16-man, they didn't know the score. I want to get your thoughts. If you were in charge of CJI 3, what rule set would you implement? Is there any style of competing that you'd love to? Obviously, no time limit, submission only was a big deal a few years ago. It might not work, logistically for such an event. But is there anything you'd like to see in terms of competition rule set or?
Yeah, look, so I'm not sure. I'm not actually. I got to find out what they're doing there in terms of, is it open scoring throughout the because that's going to dictate the approach you take as well. Because obviously I think that there is going to be judges' scores as well as the submissions in the quintet if it comes down to it.
If they're all even, right?
My thoughts were keeping the scores from the competitors, just because sometimes you're up by 2 points, I'm just going to hold on. It changes the approach. So I'm like, if they don't know whether they are, they think they got a guard pass, but did the refs think that? If you don't know, there's a bit of uncertainty that it's going to make you hopefully think, well, I better keep pushing forward. Just, keep trying to work towards improving position and submission. So that was my thoughts behind that. Same with the judges' scores in the, for example, in that final with Bilal and Declan, he didn't know where he stood in the judges' eyes compared to Kaya. So he was in a bit of a predicament because you got Declan in mount.
Do you take a risk?
Do I take a risk on getting submitted, which definitely you don't make it? Or do I take a risk in basically just keeping my arms tight? And, if I start getting penalties and then potentially my score goes down lower than Kaya's, what do you do? He chose to probably play the lower risk option in the immediate fight. And I think that's probably where having more proactive stalling calling.
We had that shot clock, right?
We had the shot clock.
Free judges for those who
tried
did
to
not
implement that. So I think wrestling's done it very well. The judges, if you get a stalling warning, you get, I think, one warning, and then after that, each one you have 30 seconds to score.
And they start the clock. They actually start a physical clock, and they go, okay, if you don't score
in 30 seconds, you get penalized. So I implemented that. I was like, I think this would be great to get people acting. I realized, this is just I'd say it's probably my fault, because I probably should got to sit down with the judges and go through some matches myself. Let's go through and how we're going to score this. Let's set a precedent at the start
on what is stalling, what facilitates a call,
and score some matches to get everyone on board with that. It probably was, I think, because the penalties are harsh, the judges then are like, well, we're gonna it's especially let's take the final match. Do I as the judge want to be the person that decides whether Bilal can make it or not? I'd rather the athletes to say that, I don't want to be the one so it makes you a bit do I, because obviously he wasn't being proactive. He was trying to escape a little. I think if he saw an opportunity to escape, he certainly would have, but not at the risk of an arm being separated, right?
Yeah,
so you could certainly, I think he got a warning with 40 seconds to go, but I think if I had less harsh penalties, this is what I was thinking actually. Now, after that event, my preferred approach to it is you have 30 seconds to change position.
Because scoring is quite tough.
Against. Well, actually, I had it score or advantage. But if you're under mount,
for Declan's mount at all people as well,
you not only got to escape, but then also
that's tough.
Get a submission attempt or a sweat. So that's looking at that. It's basically if I give Bilal a warning here, he's gonna lose a point in the judge's scorecard. Whereas I think now I'm thinking a 30 seconds to change position. So that could be recover the guard or even turn your back. Do something. If you're
some sort of movement.
If you're standing and there's two people wrestling, you think someone's stalling, take them down.
Yep.
If you really want to be on top, go for it, or pull guard.
That's actually a really good.
And therefore, they can not get the stalling penalty, but it changes the action. Like they're going to have to concede a bit, possibly. So that's what I'm thinking.
Do you think there's a rule
I
set?
think that's what they're thinking at CJI.
Well, maybe if they listen to this, they might implement it. Do you think there's a rule set that could be implemented that makes jiu-jitsu a spectator sport?
Well, I think just, that's the difference is like how aggressively the stalling in wrestling, like you start backing away a little bit, boom,
Straight on.
warning. It's not like, I'd almost just say like if you were a spectator and you imagine you're a spectator and if you feel like this is a bit of a boring match, then just give it to someone or both, that's probably the way to do it. But yeah, it is harsher in jiu-jitsu, like the first point to score than wrestling, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to talk about SubMeta and why you made it. So we've had instructionals that traditionally of 6, 7, even 10 hours long, but it seems like you've seen a gap in the market of having shorter, like more precise, more potent instructionals and more variety in terms of, like, I guess I've been using it personally as a coaching resource. It's been perfect. If I want to study up on butterfly guard, there's, maybe a 90-minute instructional as opposed to having to purchase and then look through 7, 8, 9 hours. Can you talk about, and you've also got some interesting, like at the end, you'll get a small quiz on the 2 positions. Can you talk about some of those parts?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, when we made it, it was, the first course we filmed was introduction. So it was kind of like, let's assume you know nothing about jiu-jitsu, and then we want to, so we know exactly what you know, which is nothing. I'm going to teach introduction course. Then there was like a fundamentals or foundations course after that. So, okay, now you know like the main positions, like 1 or 2 things to look for from there. Let's give you some more fundamentals, which is the foundations course. And then there's intermediate courses and advanced courses. So intermediate was kind of like in the foundations series, like we didn't cover like all the different guards. I don't think like as a fundamentals course, you need to know all the different guards. So then it's like, okay, once you know your fundamentals though, what if you want to learn spider guard? You should probably have intermediate. Like if you give someone all the details, it's too much.
It's like a fire hose, right?
Yeah.
Drink on a fire hose. There's too much detail.
Yeah. And like, there's obviously like, for someone first learning a position, or not even first learning, just to be good at it, like there's things that are going to come up very often. And there's some like more obscure, relevant things to be an expert at it, but like perhaps not so relevant when you're first learning it. So I tried to, in the intermediate courses, they're usually roughly 1 to 2 hours long. Some of them are shorter than that. In the intermediate courses, I try to show like the main things, the main problems you run into, and so on. And then you can have an advanced course on the same topic, which basically try to go through all the troubleshooting I can think of, all the issues you can run into, any extra concepts that might apply in certain situations. So, I think that's worked really well. So, and the other thing, I guess, is I've made it modular, I guess, because I'd filmed, just something I noticed, I'd filmed guard retention instructional, like a long format one. Like,
that was very long, right? You had 2 parts of it.
So it was like 20 hours in total or something. I filmed no gi open guard series. I filmed half guard anthology. Each one of those, for example, had reverse De La Riva. It's important for guard retention. It's important for an open guard. It's important, I think, if you're playing half guard as well. So, and I was like, I'm just filming the same thing, the same content, obviously possibly in slightly different contexts, but I'm like, if I had a website, I could just film a course on reverse De La Riva, and then I can slot that in that's where we had the larger themes under sets, so we've got a no-gi open guard set. I guess that has the reverse De La Riva portion, it has a De La Riva portion, and so on. We have a guard retention set, it has reverse De La Riva, it has outside the legs retention, under the legs retention. So just by filming it more modular, it saves me doubling up, and I can slot them in together. I think it's worked quite well. So yeah.
I'd love to know why you started filming YouTube videos on the Absolute MMA St. Kilda page. Because that was, it's like, maybe 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Quite a while ago you started it. And I'm curious if that was a resource you made for your students, or if you just thought this would be useful to put out there.
Originally, actually, one of our students, Jarrett, he's like, oh, I want to film something and put it on YouTube. And I was like, okay. And he filmed it, and somehow it got a bunch of views. And I was like, I guess we'll do a few more of these. And yeah, I guess that I just put classes up. It was pretty easy, and that sort of grew. So, and then at some point they got big enough, and Fanatics reached out and said, can we do an instructional? So,
because I was watching your YouTube videos before the Absolute run, and I would you were to me, you were the guy with the great YouTube videos. Like if I had a problem, we'd be like, oh, has Lachlan done a triangle escape? Oh, he has. Also, he'd be like, and I think a lot of athletes right now that want to make a living out of the sport don't understand how powerful that is. To have that association, not just as a competitor, but as someone that provides value and solves my problem. So I've said this publicly before, but I didn't know you as a competitor. It was great that you had that standout performance, but as soon as you have an instructional, I'm going to buy it because you've helped me for free on YouTube. And I know that you are a good coach and you provided valuable resources, and you've got that wider exposure. So I'm wondering if you have athletes coming up, do you encourage them to make their own content? Is it a discussion that's had at all?
Yes, it's. I mean, look, it's become a very, very competitive market. Like everyone wants to be, if you can, like the best role you can have in jiu-jitsu is like being like one of the top content creators, right? That's like, you don't. Yeah, it's just like you can expose the whole world. Can be like watching your stuff compared. And you don't have to be like as a competitor, you got to like keep right at the top of your game. Whereas as a coach, like of course you got to be good at this. You got to be good at coaching, but that's lasts a lot longer. It's not it's not so. You probably have, as I said before, probably maybe 5 years at your peak. But as a coach, that can last a lot longer. So that's definitely what everyone wants to do, which makes it extremely competitive.
Do you have any advice for someone that wants to break through?
Sorry.
Just don't do it. It's too hard.
No, it's hard, but I mean, look, I would say you just, the easiest, start filming things, putting it online. Like if you're gaining a following, like then you're doing something right. That's good. I think that can, if it starts growing and you keep working on it and it keeps growing, then it will kind of organically work into that. And the other thing I'd say is like, do things that you think are good. I think sometimes people try to make content about what are people going to like, as opposed to that, what do I like? If you do videos on what you like or whatever it is, could be roles, could be breakdowns, could be just instructionals, classes, whatever it is, just like find something that you think is good. That's probably the best way to gain an audience.
Awesome. Great advice. Lachlan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Guys, if you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe. Peace.